Favor. People love that word. They imagine it as soft, gentle. A little pat on the back, a lucky break slipping quietly into their hands. But what if it isn't? What if favor doesn't come politely? What if it doesn't knock at the door? What if it doesn't wait for your permission? What if it storms in, flips your table, tears your plans apart, and drags you into something you never thought you could handle? That's the kind of favor no one prays for, but everyone needs. Permission, funny word, isn't it? People live their whole lives waiting for it. Permission to speak, permission to try, permission to dream, permission to break the mold. They cling to it like children clutching a note from their parents, afraid that without it they'll be punished, ridiculed, cast out. But here's the truth. Favor doesn't wait in line with its hand raised, asking if it's allowed to enter. No, it kicks the door off the hinges. It barges in, uninvited, unapologetic, sometimes even unwelcome. It doesn't care about your schedule, your excuses, your fears. It comes when it decides, and when it does, it doesn't knock politely. It tears through your walls like a storm, and that's what unsettles people. They imagine blessings to be tidy, controlled, something they can pencil neatly into their calendar. But favor is messy. It doesn't align with your 5-year plan or your comfort zone. It appears when you least expect it, often when you're least prepared, and it flips everything you thought you knew upside down. You're standing there, clinging to your version of order, and suddenly favor sweeps in and wrecks it all. To some, it feels like chaos. To others, it feels violent. But to the ones who understand, it's not violence. It's interruption with purpose. It's the universe saying, you weren't going to move, so I'll move you myself. People don't like that idea. They want favor to feel safe, gentle, predictable. They want to be asked if they're ready. They want to be eased into change like dipping a toe into warm water. But that's not how transformation works. If you had your way, you'd stay comfortable forever. You'd keep your feet planted, and you'd never step into what was truly waiting for you. Favor knows that. Favor knows if it knocked politely, you'd never open the door. So it doesn't knock, it breaks the lock. It shows up without your permission because it knows you'd never give it anyway. And when it comes, you don't get to vote. You don't get to delay. You either adapt or you're left behind. The irony is, later, the same people who curse the interruption end up thanking it. They look back at the wreckage and realize the so-called destruction was actually construction. What looked like favor stealing from them was actually favor handing them everything they never knew they needed. That lost job, it wasn't loss, it was redirection. That broken relationship, it wasn't betrayal, it was protection. That closed door, it wasn't rejection, it was redirection towards something bigger. But you don't see that when favor first arrives. In the moment, all you see is the mess. Because favor doesn't come dressed like a gift. It comes dressed like a storm, and storms don't wait for your approval. They don't circle your house and politely ask if you'd like to be shaken. They hit hard, and in that impact, they reveal what's solid and what's fragile. That's what favor does. It enters without permission. It rattles everything. And it shows you which parts of your life were weak enough to collapse and which parts were strong enough to stand. It doesn't just give, it exposes. It doesn't just bless, it tests. And when the dust settles, you realize the parts that fell weren't meant to last anyway. Favor doesn't need your permission to break what was never built to hold you. But here's the catch. Most people waste their lives resenting favor because it didn't arrive the way they wanted it to. They fight it, resist it, curse it, because they can't see past the interruption. They're so obsessed with the fact that they didn't get to approve it. They miss the fact that it was the only thing that could push them into where they were meant to be. They forget that comfort doesn't produce growth. Ease doesn't produce greatness. And permission doesn't produce power. Favor doesn't care about your approval. It's not here to be liked. It's here to drag you out of the life you would have settled for, shuttle for, and shiv you into the one you were built for. And if that feels violent, if that feels unfair, maybe that's the point. Because nothing changes if nothing is interrupted. Favor doesn't show up to keep you safe. It shows up to make you dangerous. Dangerous to the limits you've set on yourself. Dangerous to the fears that have kept you small. Dangerous to the excuses you've repeated until you believed them. That's why it doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't need it. Because if it did, you'd never give it. And you'd stay exactly where you are, forever disruption. People hate that word. It rattles them, shakes their bones, makes them uneasy because they want life to run smooth, predictable, just the way they planned it on paper. They want control, order, routine. But that's the thing. Real change doesn't come dressed in order. Real transformation doesn't knock politely, smile, and slide neatly into your little schedule. No, it comes with disruption. It slams into you like a fist, like a scream in the silence, like a crack in the glass that spreads until the whole thing shatters. And yet, here's the irony. What you call disaster might actually be the gift. What feels like ruin is sometimes the only path to renewal. Think about it. Every time in history, every story of greatness, every tale of transformation, it never started with comfort. It always started with a crack, a betrayal, a collapse, a door slammed shut. Disruption rips the ground from under your feet, and in that terrifying free fall, you're forced to discover wings you never knew you had. But people don't see it that way. They cling to the ground, to their routines, to their illusions of safety, crying out when it all comes crashing down. They don't realize the crash is the catalyst. Without the disruption, you would have stayed asleep, numb, blind to the possibility of more. The gift is hidden in the violence of the interruption. That's the trick. Life has a way of packaging blessings in wrapping paper that looks like pain. You think you're being punished, but in reality, you're being propelled. You think it's the end, but it's actually the beginning disguised as loss. That job that suddenly ended, that relationship that burned to ash, that plan that collapsed, those weren't accidents. That was disruption doing its work. Because left to your own devices, you never would have left. You never would have let go. You would have settled, rotting slowly inside your own comfort, convinced that mediocrity was enough. But disruption doesn't play by your rules. It doesn't respect your comfort. It arrives when it's least convenient. And that's precisely why it's so powerful. You weren't ready. You weren't prepared. You didn't see it coming. And that's the point. It strips you down, exposes your weaknesses, tears your illusions apart, and leaves you standing in the rubble of what you thought was solid. And in that rubble, you find out who you really are. You find out if you were built for survival, or if you were just pretending. Disruption isn't the enemy, it's the mirror. It shows you the truth about yourself when the mask of routine has been ripped away and people call it cruel. They call it unfair. They cry about how life ruined their plans, as if they're little blueprints, their fragile little sketches of the future, could compare to the magnitude of what disruption has prepared for them. The truth is, sometimes the greatest kindness life can give you is to break your plans, to take the pen out of your hand, crumple up the paper, and say, "Not this way," because you would have written yourself into a corner. You would have trapped yourself in the safety of the known. And disruption knows better. Disruption is the violent editor of your story, cutting out the chapters that don't serve you, even when you scream and resist. What people miss is that growth and peace rarely live together. You can have comfort or you can have transformation, but you can't have both. Disruption understands that even if you don't. That's why it drags you, kicking and screaming, into places you never would have chosen. That's why it feels like betrayal, when in reality it's rescue. Because left in your comfort, you would never evolve. You would never stretch. You would never see how much strength was hiding inside you. But disruption knows the clock is ticking, and it refuses to let you waste your life building castles out of sand. And yes, it feels violent. It feels unfair. It feels like you've been robbed. But maybe you've only been robbed of illusions, of lies you told yourself to feel safe. Maybe you've only been robbed of the small life you thought was enough. Disruption doesn't steal, it replaces. It takes the weak things so it can hand you something stronger. It rips out the false foundation so you can build on rock instead of sand. You won't see it at first because the pain blinds you. You'll curse the storm while it's raging, but when it clears, you'll realize the storm cleared the path you never would have walked otherwise. Disruption is not a mistake. It's design. It's the violent kindness that breaks you so you can rebuild. It doesn't ask for your approval. It doesn't wait for you to agree. It just arrives, loud, merciless, unstoppable. And in that chaos lies the very gift you've been praying for. Though it rarely looks like the answer you expected, comfort. That's the sweetest poison of them all. People cradle it like a child, guard it like treasure, build their whole lives around never losing it. They call it peace. They call it happiness. They call it stability. But it's just a trap, a velvet cage with bars you can't see. Because while you're sitting in it, Nice and cozy, the world is shifting without you. Life is moving, storms are brewing, and you're rotting slowly in your own stillness, mistaking the absence of pain for the presence of purpose. Comfort doesn't nurture transformation, it smothers it. It convinces you that good enough is enough, when deep down you know you were built for more. Look around at anyone who's ever clawed their way out of mediocrity. Anyone who's ever written their name in fire across history. They all had one thing in common. They were ripped out of comfort, not by choice. Oh no. Nobody willingly abandons their warm bed for the cold unknown. It's always force. Pain shows up. Betrayal knocks, loss arrives, the ground cracks open, and suddenly the comfort you loved so much collapses in your hands. And that collapse, that's where the transformation begins. Because comfort is the enemy of hunger, and without hunger, you never chase. Without hunger, you never risk. Without hunger, you never fight. Comfort is a lullaby, and transformation never happens while you're asleep. Think about the irony. People pray for change while holding on to comfort with both hands. They want transformation, but they don't want to be touched. They want growth, but they don't want the breaking. They want to be new, but they don't want to die to the old. They don't realize comfort is the lock, and transformation is the thief that has to break in. And yes, it feels violent. It feels cruel. It feels unfair. But what else could it be? If you had it your way, you'd never move. You'd never leap. You'd never risk. You'd stay in that soft chair until you decayed, smiling while your dreams suffocated. Comfort whispers lies in your ear. It tells you tomorrow is safe, tomorrow is guaranteed, tomorrow is the day you'll start. Comfort feeds you illusions, wrapping chains in silk so you don't even notice you're bound. It makes you believe stillness is safety, when in reality stillness is slow death, because the world doesn't stop moving just because you do. Time doesn't freeze to let you breathe. While you sit in comfort, time erases you. Opportunity walks past you, doors close forever. And when you wake up, it's too late. Comfort is the thief of urgency, and without urgency, you never discover what you were really capable of, and yet people fight to defend it. They defend the job they hate, the relationship that's killing them, the habits that are draining them, all because it's comfortable, all because it's familiar, as if familiarity is the same as destiny, as if safety is the same as purpose. They build shrines to their own mediocrity and wonder why nothing changes. The truth is, nothing will until comfort is destroyed. That's why it has to be interrupted violently without your consent. That's why the universe doesn't wait for you to agree. Because left in your comfort, you'd never leave the cage. You decorate it, polish it, call it home, and die inside it. Transformation is allergic to comfort. It can't breathe in that air. It needs fire, it needs risk, it needs motion. It needs the pain of stretching, the fear of stepping where the ground might not hold. And that's why disruption comes, to suffocate your comfort before it suffocates you, to throw you into the unknown, to make you fight, to force you to see you were stronger than the softness ever allowed you to believe. Comfort keeps you blind, but the collapse opens your eyes. It burns away the illusions, tears apart the lies, and leaves you raw, exposed, trembling, but alive in a way comfort never gave you. The cruel joke is this: the thing people cling to most is the very thing holding them back. Comfort feels like a friend, but it's the assassin sitting at your table, smiling while it waits for you to go numb. And disruption, violent, merciless disruption, is the only thing that can drag you away from its grip. That's why it feels like betrayal, why it feels like loss. Because you don't realize comfort is the prison until the walls crumble. Only then do you see you weren't living. You were existing, half asleep, half alive, mistaking silence for peace. And maybe that's the hardest truth of all. Comfort doesn't care if you waste your life, but transformation does. And it'll do whatever it takes to wake you up violent shifts. They don't come knocking politely, asking if you're ready. They tear through the walls of your little world, ripping apart everything you thought was secure. And in that moment, you feel naked, powerless, broken. But hidden beneath that chaos is something most people never recognize: strength. Not the polished kind they like to display in front of others, not the rehearsed kind that wins applause, but the raw, feral strength that only shows up when you've got nothing left but yourself. You see, violent shifts are cruel teachers, but they teach lessons no calm season ever could. They strip away your illusions, they burn your crutches, and they force you to walk on legs you didn't walk on, legs you didn't even know you had. People spend their lives avoiding those moments. They pray for peace, they beg for stability, they cling to predictability like it's the lifeline keeping them afloat. But stability makes you soft, predictability makes you blind, and peace, oh, peace makes you weak. When everything runs smooth, you never dig deep. You never push past the surface. You never find out what you're made of. Because comfort never tests you. It coddles you. It rocks you to sleep while your potential rots inside you. But when the ground collapses, when the storm rages, when everything you counted on disappears, suddenly the mask falls. Suddenly, the excuses don't matter. Suddenly, it's just you against the wreckage. That's when you learn what strength really looks like. Think about it. People admire survivors, warriors, visionaries. But do you think any of them became who they are in times of calm? No. They were broken first. They were crushed, abandoned, betrayed, scarred. And in those scars, in that rubble, they found a power they didn't know existed. Violent shifts expose hidden strength because they leave you no other option. You either crumble or rise. You either drown or swim. You either vanish or fight. And in that decision, in that corner where there's no easy way out, you meet the version of yourself that doesn't take no for an answer. The version that laughs at fear, that claws through the fire, that refuses to die quietly.